I think we're live. Facebook is doing its thing. Let's just, blue bar is filling up. This is good. Hey everybody. Of course, my screen's slow. I feel like Facebook Lives now are also, okay, perfect. Yeah, we've been live. Awesome. Sorry for that slight delay. Hello, everybody in our Fathering Together community and beyond. I am so excited and thrilled to have this panel conversation with you all tonight called LatiniDad, a conversation of race, culture, and fatherhood. My good friend Joe Sacedo will be walking you through this evening. This is our third panel in this series, and we'll have many more to come, but Joe will share a little bit more as he gets into the conversation. So I will turn it over to Joe. I'll be in the background if people have questions filtering in to their feed. So stay tuned, have a great call and conversation, and I'll turn it over to Joe.
Sorry, thanks so much, Brian, for the invitation to be a part of this panel, actually moderating this panel, I should say. And thank you to my fellow dads here on the call for a conversation of wisdom, of sharing your perspectives, your journeys, your narratives of what it means to be a father, and specifically what it means to be a Latino father at that. So I'm Joe Salcedo. I'm a fellow father based here in Chicago, Illinois. Father of two little boys, Cruz, who's 5 years old, and my youngest, Isai, who is 2. And yeah, I'll turn it over to each of our panelists. We've got a few questions that are sort of been predetermined, but we encourage you who are tuning in live to be able to submit your comments, your questions, and we'll be sure to address those as they come in. But we'll start with Sergio Rosario Diaz, who also has a podcast, a web following. You'll hear from each of our panelists who are influencers of their own, who are also cultivating a strong community of fathers. And so we have first Sergio Rosario Diaz, then we'll hear from Marlon Gutierrez, and then Jorge Narvaez, and then someone who is not related, but kind of looks like me. His name's Jesse Salcedo. And he'll go after Jorge. So Sergio, if you can give us a brief introduction of who you are, tell us a little bit about your connection to the community of fathers that you are part of, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes, so my name is Sergio Rosario Diaz. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. In 2016, I founded Soy Super Papa, which is it was a bilingual community back then, but now it's totally in Spanish community for dads. Just because I think each community has its own calling, right? And it takes its course. So we have dads from over 32 countries in Soy Super Papa. It's become a nonprofit. We do panels, workshops, and we do campaigns too for fatherhood. But we mostly learn about each parenting style with fathers from different countries. So we, not only as a leader, but I think as a father, I learn a lot from my community, which is the most important thing. There's different fathers in different parts of the world who are different, are parts of different societies. So for me, that's been a blessing. I am the father of a 3-year-old, Stella. I'm a military spouse, and I'm proud to be here. So thank you for the opportunity.
Terrific. Thank you, Sergio. And then next we have Marlon Gutierrez.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. My name is Marlon Gutierrez. I'm the dad to 2 little ones. My daughter is 3 and my son is 2 months old. I run the blog and the Instagram page Being Papa, which just chronicles my life as a dad and some of the decisions I've made regarding work-life integration. My wife and I have been working remote for 5 years, and up until COVID, we used to travel extensively, giving my daughter a lot of cultural experiences firsthand. Slowly on my end, I'm trying to learn much more about myself, my own family history, and my experiences as a Latino father, and try to share that out with everyone. I am Nicaragüense, born in Miami. Used to spend all my summers in Nicaragua in my abuelita's house, and I think to this day, those experiences really have shaped out who I am and how I parent. And I live in Orlando. I started the Orlando Dads group there with the City Dads group. And through that organization, I've been able to meet just so many dads, both locally and also on a national level. And yeah, I just learned so much from them all the time. So I think that's pretty much it. Looking forward to having this conversation with everyone.
Thank you. Next we have Jorge Narvaez.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jorge Narvaez, and I am super happy to be here. I have a YouTube channel called Reality Changers, but I've been doing a lot of other social media things all over the place. I focus on family, community, art, and music, and I definitely have a passion about talking about fatherhood. It's a conversation that I feel like we need to have as much as possible. I used to work for a nonprofit here in San Diego called San Diego Dad's Corps. I was at the forefront of working with dads who were coming out of prison, going into the military, coming back from like Afghanistan, and also just civilians who were struggling, figuring out a way to connect with their kids. And I resonated with that. So with that, I picked it up and I said, look, we really need to have this bigger conversation online with other people, especially with other people who might not understand what fatherhood actually means and the struggles we all have, you know, and that we share. So I'm very happy to be here to have just a bigger conversation about what's going on.
Great. Thank you, Jorge. And then finally, we've got Jesse Salcedo.
Yeah, hi, Jesse Salcedo here, currently in Los Angeles. First, thanks to Fathering Together, Brian and Joe, for the invite. But great to be here with the other fathers here, especially Latino fathers. I'm currently in LA, but by way of San Antonio, Texas. So third generation Mexican, Tejano, dad to two 3-year-old twins, 3.5, boy and a girl, Adelina and Tomas, and been stay-at-home dad for the past 3 years, casi. And before that, I was working in public service with the City Housing Department here in LA. Prior to that, working with a few elected officials. And like has been mentioned, definitely looking forward to talking more about our fatherhood experiences.
Excellent. Thanks, Jesse. So as you can tell, if you're tuning in, you know, we are going to be addressing a few different topics that are pretty personal and relevant to us in terms of culture, race, you know, fatherhood, and sort of looking at all the intersections of these core experiences. But I do want to caution, you know, you know, in thinking about this idea of LatiniDad, there's so much complexity, right? I think in beauty behind and diversity, really. Within LatiniDad and this idea of Latino culture, heritage, and identity. And so I'm very pleased just hearing in the brief intros that all of you offered, there's definitely a lot of, I think, rich experience and diversity that we'll be getting to shortly. But also I know that there's some common threads in terms of uniting us as fathers. So thank you again. The first question that I want to throw your way is really about how does Latino heritage, how does your, you know, background as Latino really inform, how does it inform your approach to parenting?
In my case, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I lived there until I was an adult, pretty much, right? I think the choice of coming to the U.S. was mine as an adult, so I did have a choice to come and also experience most of all of my childhood and adulthood, you know, to a certain point. I am a folklorist, so I play this instrument right here. I'm going to show you guys, and I sing, and I talk about our oral tradition and history. This is a bomba drum. So that's pretty much a part of what I do as a professional. And you know, I think as a Latino, when I talk about this with Marlon on the podcast, it's about how you approach your identity, right? My dad was a musician, and I did grow up with the musical side, but I never grew with the identity of the Afro-Caribbean culture. Me coming from Puerto Rico, it's an island, it's in the Caribbean. So most of our heritage is African and indigenous. And that's not how we are brought up, right? For us, it used to be shameful to talk about our indigenous heritage or African heritage. And it wasn't until I grew up into an adult that I was a musician. I never touched that side of music. I knew about it, but I never dove deep into the research and the stuff that I do now, that I decided that it was something that I wanted to raise my child with, you know, being aware. I wanted her to have something that I didn't have. And it was that awareness of just being able to choose and to represent and to also acknowledge, you know, that we come from mixed cultures, and it's important to know them all. So I think, as a parent, my approach is to give my daughter all the information she needs, and I integrate her into this workshop. She comes with me. We were one at Duke University a couple of months ago, and she was just having fun. And she brings her skirt. She dances, and people see that and they are very impressed. But I think it's also her choice as a baby, right? As a toddler, it's her choice just because she chooses to share that with her dad, and it's my job to give her the tools and let her decide. But I'm showing her all sides of the story, and that's, for me, is very important.
I love that. Definitely important to what I'm hearing is giving your daughter agency, but also giving her access to a much fuller narrative and perspective. Thank you, Sergio. Marlon, you care to share on that?
Yeah. So for me, being raised in Miami and being of Nicaraguan background, having the opportunity to spend my summers there, I always had some sort of conflict within my own identity growing up. I would go to Nicaragua and I would feel like I was a little bit too Americano for that. Then I'd go here. And obviously, when I went to college with other outside of my Miami culture, it was like culture shock for me. And I was like, oh man, like what am I? I don't know what to identify as. It was very difficult. And through that process, I just learned so much about my own culture and, looking at all the things that you can see, the things that are explicitly learned and the things that you like and you see, like the culture, music, food, arts, dancing, and the things I wanted to take from this Latin upbringing mixed together with the things that I liked from the American culture and their sense of independence and being able to do what you want for your own individuality and all these concepts together that I chose. Like, now that I'm a parent, I'm going to take the elements that I like from these cultures that I've surrounded myself with and be, just like Sergio said, try to educate myself more about both sides of the equation across just not the positives, but also the negatives, so that I can raise a child that has a choice and that they can decide, what am I going to be doing in my life? What is it that I want to choose to be identifying as if they want to? So that's essentially, for me, being a Latino father in America, that's how I perceive being able to raise kids in that.
Jorge, similar question. Could you kind of share with us how maybe LatiniDad informs the approach or the ways in which you are raising or have raised your children?
Yeah, honestly, I love Sergio's answer and Marlon's answer, because they're discussing the idea of like access and teaching our children to know the how the opportunities are there and placing them in front of them, right? I think as a father, as a Latino father, growing up, I had certain limited access to certain types of knowledge, certain types of education, certain types of spaces that I was like, wait, that's not, I don't belong there, right? I shouldn't listen to that type of music. I shouldn't learn that. Why am I not learning that? And as I grew up, thinking to myself, why not? Why are we not teaching our children, especially because of being Latino, being Mexicano, right? Being Mexican. I come from a very stoic, very structured, very like, very niche type of way of thinking, and so to unlearn that, especially the toxic parts. It is, and now that I have two daughters and I have a son, I really get the idea of like giving these kids access by them watching me, witnessing me doing them, right? For example, nobody knows it right now, but I'm in the mountains, right? I'm in the mountains in Idlewild right now. And I'm allowing and I'm giving my children access to know, dude, this place, you belong here. Come out here whenever you need to. This is where you can come and relax and decompress. Doesn't matter if you're Latino, Chicano, Mexicano, Puerto Riqueño. Don't close yourself out just because that's something that you grew up thinking it wasn't like for us. So I feel like opening those doors to our children and allowing them to visibly see, hey, this space belongs to you too.
I really appreciate that, all of your responses so far. And you mentioned, Jorge, something around that I wanted to segue to this point of some of the norms that we've been exposed to in our own upbringing. And a lot of that, I'll speak from my experience, a lot of my own social upbringing directly informs the ways in which I'm choosing to raise my kids, or sometimes it's subconscious things that will come up and I'm like, wow, where did that come from? And I'm thinking, wow, that's like my dad or my mom's influence or my abuela, you know. So I wanted to ask Jesse a question around if you could speak to, because you shared in your intro that you've been a stay-at-home dad for the past 3 years. And so I wondered if you could, because that certainly wasn't a, you know, the norm, I think, growing up, of seeing the father be the caregiver, the primary caretaker of the kids. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to what that experience has been like for you personally, and what you've noticed even amongst family.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and of course, for folks that are tuning in, right? Yeah, definitely, your eyes don't deceive you. It was a little surreal being a twin dad, right? Having twins and us being identical twins. But I think as far as you know, being stay at home, I will say, you know, it actually stemmed from before we were even expecting, before we were pregnant. Years ago, my wife and I, Cielo, we met in college in Boston. And so anyhow, we would have these conversations early on, like about how many kids you want, things like that. We talked about it for some years, even after getting married. You know, what if one of us would be able to stay home, right? And then when we finally got to this situation where we're expecting, okay, fine, and it looked like a reality, like, hey, financially, right? We were in a place that, hey, could we do this, and who would it be, right? And so, anyways, it was that decision to say, hey, well, it looked, financially speaking, it looked like, okay, well, she's breadwinner here, then it makes sense. If we want to do this, then why not? And so it's kind of, I'll be honest, early on, I was like, yeah, gung ho for it, but then when it got closer, I thought, I started having some second thoughts, right? And I think a lot of that stems from kind of going back to what you're saying as far as the upbringing, even our Latino culture, right, and the gender norms. And I think ultimately it was why wouldn't I want this opportunity if we have it, right, and to actually stay home versus having some stranger take care of them, right? And so anyhow, fast forward. I stayed home when they were 8 months. Cielo stayed here for the first 8. And so I thought it would be a year, turned into about 3 years. So it's been awesome. It's been very challenging. But it's been very awesome. I think also with two, I mean, I think for me, having grown up as a twin, that obviously helped out with the psyche. I wasn't necessarily worried about that. It was just a matter of, okay, there's more than one here. But I think what I noticed, just to go back to with even the Latino culture, you know, when we decided, we talked to our parents, let's say my suegro. So my wife Cielo's from out here in SoCal, and her mom and dad are from Mexico. So we had the conversations, and they, you know, they're traditional yet somewhat progressive, but when it came to it, they thought it wasn't the best idea. And I think it just goes back to what they were used to. They thought, well, it should be the mom and things like that, where, you know, and she was like thinking, well, you know, why did I go to college, right, and pursue this type of career anyhow? But I think that I wasn't surprised by that. But I think it was interesting just to mentally, what I would say, it's helpful to just have discussions, right? Especially with your partner, wife, husband, if that's an opportunity there to think like, hey, does it make sense? What does it mean for us, right? What does it mean for our kids, really? And I've noticed, actually, we both noticed that it has been the best thing for us right now. And so, yeah. So, and I think one other thing, last thing, I think, as far as, you know, first year going out to either parks or indoor spaces with the kids, just because you go stir crazy being at home at times. And you know, I've run into some of the other parents, or mainly moms, right, or even nannies who are Latinas. So it's interesting because I would get some looks, but I also get some words of encouragement. So it was an interesting experience, I think, but it's been awesome. Actually, I would highly recommend it if anybody has the opportunity to.
Thanks, Jess, for sharing that. A question I have, because clearly we are experiencing a very unprecedented time, I think, in the world's history, certainly for this country's history of moving through the world in a pandemic. For some of us, myself included, you know, we're working and parenting at the same time from home. And that can present, you know, certainly some benefits, but also in terms of quality time with our kids. But it can also present some challenges. And so I wanted to hear from you guys and how, you know, you all are managing, you know, this time, because I think it calls on us in a unique way, not just to sort of be attentive to our kids and our family members, our partners, our spouses, and for some of us, our jobs as well. But there's also, I think, a mental toll, that's at least for me personally, it's taken just sort of when I wrap my head around the fact that, folks are really struggling, in multiple ways. Some are even are losing lives as we speak. And so I'm just curious, just to, as one parent to another, to kind of gain some guidance. How are you all managing, what sort of advice or strategies might you have for our audience members as well? What?
I'll be honest with you, man. When we found out that COVID was like, everybody go inside the house. Um, at first it was like scary, right? But because we didn't know what was going on. But man, a lot happened to me personally when I found out. I was like, oh my gosh, my mental health. Oh my God, my children's mental health. Oh my gosh, their schooling. Oh my gosh. It was like a bunch of stuff coming at me. And I was like, I had an anxiety attack, to be honest with you. I'm not going to lie to you. And I had to face a lot of demons, man. A lot of stuff that I think a lot of people are, especially some of those couples that are like, they were already on edge, and relationships, and also even brothers and sisters and siblings. um and I'm just speaking for personal experience, seeing my children and seeing me and my wife overreact, and get worried. It took a mental toll on us, man. We had to like take a step back. I had to literally make my own space. Okay, like this space behind me, it's virtual right now, but I was going through some heavy depressive stuff, trying to figure out how to survive. Why am I not qualifying for the stimulus check? Why is this not, why is this happening? Right? I was in my head, man. I was just inside my head. And I realized that I was in my head, and I became self-aware, and I was like, I gotta get out. I gotta get out of my head. I gotta start building stuff. I gotta figure out. I went into like instinctual mode as a father, and I got into my hustle mode. And there's something about the struggle. And I feel like, because of I've always been in survival mode all my life, I'm struggling with like what my mom went through with like immigration and like being undocumented, like when we were young.
Sorry, I think we just.
I did
Sorry,
some
Jorge.
crying. Yeah. Okay. I can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I did some crying. I did some letting go of some stuff, and I finally came to terms with it that I need to create my own little universe. I need to create my own little space. So I renovated my whole garage, dude. I stole my daughter's IKEA furniture, and I made a studio, and I allowed my children to see my process, to see me work my ass off downstairs, and they started realizing it too, and they started doing things too, and that's when I hit me. These kids are mimicking everything that I'm doing, both good and bad. And I was like, oh, okay, we got to figure this out. So like Nancy and I were like, we got to get our stuff together, girl. Like we need to get our stuff emotionally together, or we're gonna crash, So that's what happened to me, man. It was it's been still a roller coaster, but now
Yeah.
I have a better idea of where I am, what I need to do, and where I need to go.
Listen, I appreciate you for being so vulnerable and open, Jorge. Definitely. Marlon.
Yeah. So like I said before, I've been working remote for 5 years. My wife as well. So for a long time, we felt like we had a really good structure in place. Once Isabella was born, we set up time so that we'd be working and switching on and off. So I'd be working in the morning, and then I'd be taking her, and then after in the afternoon we would switch, and she would do all that, and we had the ability to do that. But when COVID came about, everything was just shaken up because we felt like, okay, we've got this. We've worked from home for a long time. We understand, how to do this. We've got the system. There were so many unknown factors that started coming in, like the schooling situation was just terrible because now my daughter had to do school while we also had to be parenting. And then my wife was pregnant. She was already having complications in the pregnancy. And that was a whole ordeal that I felt like I had to do something about. And, similar to Jorge's situation, my anxiety was just out of control. We had opted to have a home delivery, which we thought was going to be great because it prevented us from having to go to the hospital or expose ourselves in the family. And then, as luck would have it, I had an injury that I had to go to the ER, and it was a shoulder injury a few days before the labor. So that got me in a completely different mindset of like just panic, thinking that I was going to get this thing. And what I had to do was really understand that, you know, this is a very precious time in my life when I have my newborn with me. My daughter, she's with us more than she ever has. There's always going to be things that I have to work at with my job and all that, but I have to make the most out of it. So for me, the best thing was really being patient with myself, and then seeking professional help. So I am seeing a therapist that's helping me look at the rational side of a lot of these anxieties that came about, because a lot of it is just in our head and we're just freaking out about a lot of things. But you know, once you start taking a look at everything and how everything is just so fear driven, then you can feel better about the decisions you're making. And that's the stage where I'm at. Obviously not perfect. We're still pretty much quarantined. We don't go out. Our baby's still little, but I'm trying to make the best out of this new norm.
Yeah, thank you. And congrats again on the baby.
Thanks.
Sergio or Jesse, did you care to add to that?
Yeah, I can say something. So for me, I've been a stay-at-home parent as well for over 2 years. And having my wife work from home, right? Usually like military people, they're always in the field. They're doing, you know, stuff over there at their offices at the field. But my wife was working from home. So it was about sharing the space, about changing, like I was a little bit jealous, to be honest, because the time that I used to be spent home, it was my daughters and I only. So we had my wife, she was in the mix. My daughter was noticing there was a lot of stuff going on. As far as what happened with COVID, we quarantined ourselves, but then at the same time, we started looking at the social justice movements that all these events that were going on. And for me, that was hard as a man, just because I would be the kind of person that I would be out there protesting. I would be out there. I always been like that. My mom taught me to voice my opinion, and she would take me to these marchas, protestas, you know, rallies when I was a kid. And I remember like when I was at the UPR, University of Puerto Rico, we had a strike, and she went in there with me. My grandma, both of my grandmas were there with me. So, you know, I come from a family that we are activists. And for the first time, you know, debating in my head whether I should be out there or I should be staying home with my daughter, and then kind of like processing this fight, you know, in a different way. How can I contribute to it without being in the streets, and then being there firsthand? So it took a while for me to decide how I was going to contribute to it. And afterwards, I started, you know, like this panel, I started putting together panels. I started having talks with friends. I did a episode with Marlon on the podcast, and you know, I've been in a lot of conversations. And I think it's important that we as parents, you know, once you become a father, so many things change. And it's also a time for us to reflect whether, you know, where am I standing now and where I'm going next. And for me, it was, you know, a big change, just because I was the type of person, even when I live in DC for almost 7 years, I would be out there in the protests. I would be out there in the rallies. Last July, there was a protest going on in Puerto Rico that, you know, governor resigned, and I was there on vacation, and I actually went to the protest. You know, I'm very much, this is something that's, you know, embedded in my, I would say, how my mom raised me. It's so deep that it's part of what we do every day. We voice our opinions and we seek social justice. So for me, it was about finding the right channel, and about, if the channel was not built, building it, and then keeping it going. And that's why I'm so excited to be sharing with all these amazing dads here, because we're continuing that that movement right through this panel. So I just want to say thank you again, and I really appreciate every single one of you for being here.
Thank you, Sergio. And I love it. And I want to, in a moment, come back to this topic of role modeling, and this idea of how social justice, you know, is integrated within all of your lives. So, Jesse, Do you want to
Yeah.
share regarding the previous question?
Sure. Just to add to what's saying, it is kind of interesting. What Sergio was saying, yes, my wife Cielo started working from home, definitely changed a bit. However, I think it's definitely interesting. I would say as far as how it affected my son and daughter, Tomas and Adelina, right? The biggest change is that they weren't able to see their abuelos. They live about 20 minutes from here, and their tias, and so that kind of been the one of the bigger challenges for us, I think. But thank God for technology, right? We can FaceTime and use other methods too in the phone. But I think what's kind of been helpful too is also just trying to have a schedule for so we don't lose our minds, right? Have a schedule for the kids, I would say, just kind of keeping on that and just engaging them. But I think what's interesting, going back to us as fathers, right? And I appreciate everybody here too. Definitely vulnerability, right? That's something I think that's not uh, as maybe encouraged within our culture, wasn't at our house, right? In terms of being vulnerable per se. So I think it's important, right, for kids, like that's I think it was Jorge had mentioned about access, right, too, that they see it. And I think it's important for us to just have these conversations with our kids, right, and understand that we need our outlets too, right? So outlets with as men, right, too, as dads, fathers. For me, it's been family, right, and also friends, and so another outlet for me too has been even my own fraternity brothers too, Latino fraternity, and so a lot of us are going through different things, right? So I know we all have our networks fathering together. So I think those are important to continue, right? Especially right now when a lot of uncertainties are happening. But it's important, as somebody suggested to me when we're having conversations with the kids, to say, hey, look, it's okay to, it's more than okay. It's encouraged to let your kids know that you are scared, right? And you are sad. How are you feeling, right? So that you're building that trust. And I think for me, I do struggle, and I'm interested in hearing from other fathers here, and Joe too, right? As far as what is it an age appropriate, or when is it appropriate to talk about certain things, right? So obviously COVID, none of us really know it, understand what's going to happen, right? And those are the types of things I'm kind of struggling with too, other than reading, right, and talking to other folks about what's happening. So
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And Jorge, if you want to address or respond to the question, what is age appropriate, or how is it that you, depending on the ages of your children, are able to bring up these topics that are pretty serious?
Give me a second. I can't hear you guys.
Oh,
Give me
yeah.
a second.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, I think we often forget as parents that again, our children are watching us. They're watching our process. They're watching how we cry, how we stress out, how we do good, how we do bad, and based on that, they're going to mimic everything that we do and we don't do. So going back to where Sergio was saying about like not being afraid of speaking up. And I feel like this whole thing with COVID, there's a deep psychological component to it that I think is affecting a lot of people. And it's also creating this like the sense of like this social distancing, but it's also causing like not being able to congregate the way that we should, right? And I get it. We have to focus and take care of each other's health, because there's a lot of elders that don't have a strong immune system, that and we have to protect them. We have to take care of our families and stuff like that. However, there is an urgency for us to make sure that we continue to have the visual fight, right? To make sure that our kids see us okay, that they also have the opportunity to speak up and to have a voice. So some of the stuff that we're doing at home, right? Like I can't go out and protest with my kids. I can't do any of that, and I'm used to that too as well, man. I was big on that when I was at UCSD. I was practicing ethnic studies, and I was talking about affirmative action and immigration reform and also fatherhood rights, right? And but so instead, what I'm doing is trying to integrate it and teach it to my kids, and talking to them and having legitimate deep conversations about it, in a very structure that is fun, that is healthy, because they're getting exposed to so much things right now on TikTok. They're getting exposed to so much stuff on social media, and we don't know what it is, man. And sometimes it can be a very distorted, warped perspective of what's happening in society. So at the end of the day, man, we just have to remember that we are their first teachers. We are in control of we have to be in control. You know what I mean? Because we are the parents, not the schools. I mean, the schools are there, but you know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we show up and be present. And as hard as it is sometimes right now, especially for those of us who are extremely under resourced, who have been losing their apartments, who have been losing time with the kids, who are probably working 2 to 3 jobs right now, you know, that are being affected, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. We have these affluent communities, you know, these affluent fathers that are like spending the time of their lives, dude, with their kids. They're like, oh, I'm so happy to finally reconnect with my kids and doing all this. That's good for you, dude. We got kids with parents that are under resourced, that are like, they see their kids, they see their parents like, wow, my parents are stressed the hell out right now.
Yeah.
And so that gap, that like that's missing, you know, that I think we often forget, you know. And we have to remember that not all parents are okay right now, and not all kids are okay right now. And we have to remember that we're teachers, and we have to continue to support each other, and to have these healthy conversations as parents and as fathers, because regardless of where we're from, you know, whether you're from Puerto Rico. I mean, Puerto Rico's got a deep ass history, man, about what's been going on over there. And so is Mexico, you know, and some of you from different parts of the world, you know what's going on and how that's affecting all of us. And we have to remember to protect our children's minds, man. Their minds are being warped right now. They're being very it's becoming a very toxic space, and it's scary, dude. And so I have to teach my kids meditation. I have to teach them to breathe. I have to teach them to learn how to be okay with what they're feeling, you know, and to learn how to cry. That's stuff that they're never going to learn at school, and especially right now, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like parenting, being a dad has gone like from 0 to 1,000 miles per hour.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And there's something you said too at the beginning, Jorge, about to remind ourselves that we are our kids' first teachers, right? And I'll add to that and say that often I feel like my son, who's 5, my firstborn, is my first teacher, or teaching me constantly, right? And I think I say that to say he sees the world brand new, and I think a lot of times I'm catching myself being jaded by so many things in life, losing sight of what truly matters. And it's often my youngest, both of them together, even when they're fighting. They'll say things at these moments that will catch me off guard and remind me that, oh yeah, this shit isn't like, the work is going to get done. I'm not, you know, a first responder. Like, I'm not in the business right now of saving lives. So like, I can put this on hold and like tend to him or tend to their mom. And so anyway, I just think that's something that I often come back to, of like just trying to be present, you know, to them. But if I don't take the time to do so, I'm really going to be missing out, which is a disservice. So I appreciate you for saying that. Fellas, Sergio, Marlon, or Jess, did you want to weigh in on that too, or?
I guess in my situation, like my daughter, she's 3, and she's been in school where she's had a diverse set of friends. And for me, before all this, I just thought it was so beautiful that she had such diverse group of friends that she couldn't really see anything that was different, you know, than how she was. And throughout all this, it was very important for me to realize that it's never too early to teach about those differences, so that she's aware of those differences, versus, you know, just assuming that, you know, you can be blind to what people are in their cultures and all that. So I've been trying to learn as much as I can so that I can explain it to her in a way that makes sense to her. So we're starting off with like teaching differences between hair color, skin color, like just the way that people may dress and all that. And it's resonating well with her. I love that there's now like a lot of resources and books that can help present that. So I'm just trying to learn as much as I can so that I present it in a way that's digestible, because it's just so much that I don't also want to overwhelm her in an already overwhelming time. So just taking baby steps to get there.
Sergio or Jesse? Yeah.
I was gonna, add to, you're right. As far as never too early, and I think one of the things is of course it's helped us is having these conversations with my wife and I. Right, we talk about, okay, what about this? What about that? As far as issues that are happening around us. But I think too, when it comes to just going back to the LatiniDad, right, Latino culture, and what's happening right now, right, social injustices, and we're talking about race, and you know, even internally, right, we've seen it growing up, as far as the racist comments as far as skin color, even within, I'll just say my own family. Like my wife's darker complected than I am, and I'm Güero, right? We're Güero, and our dad is más moreno than our mom, and so things like that, those tend to stick, right? But we're conscious when we're talking with our daughter and son, because they tend to be, my daughter's a little more morenita than her brother, and so we're conscious of that when we're talking to like the abuelos, this and that. Just say, hey, look, we acknowledge it, but we don't accept it, right? We talk about, hey, that's not acceptable, right? That type of language, because a lot of that's going to stick, and it has stuck in the past, like I said. So I think we're definitely mindful of that, and also just trying to surround ourselves with other friends, right? Close, like they have either titis or tias or even aunties, right? Who are different ethnicities, right? Asian American, African American, and LGBTQ. So I think for us, as far as how we look ahead, I think that's kind of helpful too for us. At least that's what I'm thinking. I'm not sure if anybody else has some thoughts on that.
In my case, I think, what we watch on TV as a family sometimes gives us the right opportunity to have conversations, even though I have a 3-year-old. Like, for example, we've been, like Marlon say, there's never a set age for us to start educating our kids about a certain topic. Maybe, yeah, set some boundaries and limits of information, because it can be overwhelming. But like, for example, we were watching a show on Netflix, and there was a scene where there was a LGBTQIA couple, right? And I took advantage of that to make it normal. Like, she said, like, oh, ellos se están dando amor. And I was like, okay, she gets the concept of love. So now we have to take advantage that she's actually processing that in her head, and talk about how love, right, has no color, no gender, and everybody is capable of loving each other no matter how they look like. So we took that, and we were like, instead of you remember how our parents, there was like a nude scene or a kissing scene, and they would go like that, or go on like on the middle of the TV, or change the channel or something. Like, I've been trying to, and don't get me wrong, like, I get these scenes in the back of my head. I remember like my grandma just getting like in front of the TV, and it's like like, you remember when Spider-Man gets his spider sense, like you get like your skin gets like, oh, it's something natural, because it's been in our heads for so long that it's like an impulse. But at the same time, you have, as a parent, to control those impulses and teach them what they are visually and what they're visually like having in front of them. So it's taking advantage of what's going on and making them teaching opportunities.
Right on. Yeah.
I second that. Second all that right there, bro.
Right. So at the beginning of this, and I think in even the publicity for today's panel discussion, there was information about, I know you, Sergio, Marlon, and Jorge, who have created content or continue to create and build content online, are influencing and building this community of dads. And I'm wondering if we could go around to hear from you first. What was the impetus for having created this, and then what are some ways that folks, if they're tuning in for the first time and are not familiar, what advice do you have for them to get plugged in? So we can start with Marlon, and then Jorge and Sergio.
Yeah, my involvement with the dad community started off when my wife was pregnant, and I felt like I needed a network of other fathers that I could talk to. From my group of friends, I was the first one to become a dad, so I didn't have that immediately. And then I started going online and saw this community of dad bloggers that I was just so very much impressed by, and everything that they had done. I saw that there were fatherhood conferences, and all these conversations were taking place that I wanted to take part of. So I started off with trying to go to a dad group. I saw that there was nothing in my city. So I reached out to the City Dads Group founder, who's over in New York, and it was just an amazing opportunity for me to start a group in Orlando. So that's pretty much how I started getting with the fatherhood circles. Lance and Matt, who run the City Dads group, national group, they helped me get started. I started meeting other dads. Then I started naturally blogging about my experiences on fatherhood and the things that I was experiencing myself for the first time. My unique take on certain aspects of parenting and all that. And it just kind of grew naturally. I'm very happy with just the conversations, the people that I've been able to meet, the conferences I've been able to go to. I think it's just helped me be so much better. And what I was seeking, I didn't realize was so much bigger than what I thought at the time. You know, I just wanted other dads to hang out with. I didn't know that it was going to become so big as, you know, people that I can look to for certain answers based out of their own experiences with their kids, because there is no manual. It's all based on experience and what we're all trying to do so that we can be the fathers that we want to be.
I love that, man. I love that. I think for me, man, I mean, this whole thing with YouTube started by accident. It was just like me singing to my daughter, you know. And then when the light bulb hit, when I was like, hey, maybe I could just like vlog about like what I do as a dad. I was already obsessed with recording little moments with my kids, anyways, and I was already like a YouTuber, but I wasn't a YouTuber. I was just like obsessed with recording things, right? And then as I was doing all that singing with my kids, you know, I started noticing like a lot more people started like following me, and you know, we ended up on the Ellen show. But the whole thing with the show and all this stuff was, it's not, that's not what mattered to me the most. What really mattered to me the most was the way in which a simple video created such a relatable moment to people, especially to fathers who may not even have that type of moment, right? They yearn for those types of moments with their kids, that might even have some sort of custodial issue, right? Like some custody issue, or and it wasn't until I started working, when I started looking for work in the fatherhood programs. I was my daughters were going to the 6 to 6, and I found out there was a male involvement program through the neighborhood house association, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I was going through a lot of stuff in my life at the time. I was trying to figure out what was going on with me. I was like, I need to really reconnect with my fatherhood roots, and I was losing it, man. I was really losing it. And I started volunteering, and I loved it, man. I got really involved. I would take my guitar and perform at these like after school programs with kids, and like I would just hang out with them. I would just it was such a peaceful, cool place, man. There's so much need, y'all, like so much need for males to fathers to be in spaces where children are, to educate and to inspire. Really makes a difference, man. And after that light bulb hit, I was like, I want to get, if I'm going to spend so much time doing this volunteering, I want to get paid for it and maybe make a living out of it. So I actually got a job, and I got hired at this place called the San Diego Dad's Corps program. And San Diego, I was a outreach coordinator. I was an intake recruiter. So I spoke to everybody coming into the program, and I got a taste of what dads were struggling with, man. Got a taste of some of them that were coming out, like I said, coming out of prison, coming back from war. Some of them were just had lost their kids for like the stupidest things, like some of them that had just immigrated from different countries where it was like allowed to hit them with a stick in the back of their legs, and then they get like, and then I'll never forget, this guy was like so confused. He was like, I just got my daughter taken away because they're, you know, teachers are mandated reporters, and I needed to I don't understand why it's a big deal. I'm like, well, I mean, it's just, this is something that we just don't do here. You can't hit your kids with it. And so I would have to determine where to put him with the right case manager, with the right counselor, and with the right person to help that person. So I had to like visualize how to help this person. And every call that came in, it kind of shaped me and helped me understand what I was struggling with too. I was like, man, you know, like I needed to go through this program myself. And so I did. And it just gave me a new perspective of like what dads need and the lack of funding in these nonprofit programs, man. There's so much lack of funding. And you know what happened with the program? I was in it for 2 years, and 2 years later, it ran out of funding because the federal government does not push in any way, shape, or form. And they say they do, but there's no money, dude. There's no money for dads out there, and it's the saddest thing I've ever seen. There's no money. There's no money for dad programs. There's no money. There's no money for dad mental health programs. Why? I don't know. I don't know, but I really want to see a change. I really would love to see our country have an urgency in pushing the fatherhood agenda. Not because we're being attacked by women. No, dude, in solidarity with the urgency of having this strong foundation for the family.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, I think it was all about heritage when I decided to get involved. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. My wife too, even though we met in DC. And when we knew our daughter was gonna be born in the U.S., the first in our families, we were happy, but at the same time concerned, just because how is she gonna grow up? Is she gonna grow up with the same traditions? Is she gonna speak like us? Is like all these things that you that you never think about, but then when you're expecting, like, they just flood your head, like, these thoughts. And she's gonna sound like Puerto Rican, like, is she gonna just speak English? And today, I was with my daughter. We were cooking, and she just said something to me that it was like very Puerto Rican. It was like the way she said it, and I was like, I am so glad that I got to stay home and shape, like, at least like the fundamentals for my daughter to be. I would say what we want her to be is twice as great as we got to be, like, as the persons and professionals we got to be. So I'm really thankful, like, when she speaks to me and she said those things that my abuela used to say, or that our fathers used to say, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it right. But it was just because from the beginning it was una preocupación, right? It was like this, it was embedded in me. It was like something that I really was worried about, and we decided to take action. And you know um I said it was because of heritage and culture that I started. And then when I decided to build Soy Super Papa, and start like shaping it, it was for Puerto Rico. But Puerto Rico wasn't ready for that. I think it's still not ready. And I got to work twice as hard because I'm not living in there. But I do go back, and every time that I'm visiting, I do some type of events for that, because I want them to know that it's important. So when Soy Super Papa took off, it was just Latino dads from everywhere. Chile, Argentina, Mexico is our biggest, like, uh, following. España, we have a lot of fathers from España. And it was just, okay, let's not make this about where we are from. Let's make this about fatherhood, and let's see what each other has to bring to the table. And that was fabulous. Like, I learn every day when I'm there, like, approving and moderating and reading all this. I'm just so happy, like, to get to know dads who have different, like, inputs and ideas on just regular stuff in life. So I think it's, Latinidad, what represents for us is to bring our heritage into how we raise our kids, but also give them tools that we didn't have to make them citizens of the world, not just Latinos and Latinas or Latinxes, just so they can grow up to be citizens of the world. And just not only learn about being Latinos and Latinas, just to be citizens of the world per se, like, general, and grow like that. Don't not to I would say, when I went to college in Milwaukee for 2 years, um I was like the cool Latino kid, right? And for me, that was so cool. I was like, oh, his hair is wavy and all these kinds of things. And now I go back and I'm like, no, it shouldn't have been like that, right? Like, shouldn't have been like that. It's not because I was the exotic kid with the wavy hair and the dark hair and all these features, the accent. It wasn't cool. Like, we need to be a lot more aware of that. And I would love for my daughter to go to an experience that's similar but with the right tools. So when they ask her, like, why do you speak like that, or what do you have an accent, she can have the right answer. Like, she can educate people about where she came from and what she went through. So for me, it was more of the involvement was about heritage.
That's great. No, thank you. And as someone who's been able to check out your sites and even listen to a podcast episode from Soy Super Papa, I would definitely recommend our audience to make time to check all out, to get plugged in wherever they might be in the country or the world. Because as you all mentioned, I think this theme of community is so important. with or without a pandemic, right? I think it's important to lean on our community, our family, yes, as well as folks that are near and dear to us. There's something, and I know, Jess, you had mentioned earlier, finding a lot of strength in your fraternity. And I'm curious if you could speak on any other sort of ways that dads can link up, whether it's online or in person. Are there other strategies you might be willing to share now?
Yeah. First off, yeah. Amen to everything that everybody else had mentioned too. It's so important. I mean, I appreciate everybody here creating those communities for us, right? For Latino fathers, especially everywhere. Yeah, for me, active still with my fraternity, Phi Iota Alpha, and it's been, it's interesting. I was gonna say this is kind of newer as far as more of a formal thing, but there was a dad's group that was just started maybe 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And so anyhow, most guys tend to engage with alumni, right, from the different schools that they went to, but or where they live. But I think this is a little newer, and it just speaks to the importance of why we need these communities, right, to help each other and just talk, right, hear from everybody. So I think for me that's been very helpful too. Definitely important for us, for family members, but also in community. There are groups. I was just going to mention there was a group early on when I first stayed home, the National at Home Network, National at Home Dads Network, but I really didn't push it too much. I just checked maybe one event, but didn't really go enough. And I think it's important, right, for anybody to just really seek out, participate in any of or all of these organizations. I plan to actually reach out to everybody here because I want to definitely share with other friends, other fathers, and expecting fathers también. So I think that's important.
Thank you.
Sorry, you bring up something that I think is important. Is allowing ourselves to constantly be in these types of spaces with these types of conversations. I think we have to continuously update ourselves with what's going on as far as the fatherhood topic. And I think we just forget, we get caught up with our families. We get caught up in our heads. And I feel like we forget to talk. We forget to talk about these things together. And in the process, the conversations are not going anywhere. And we're losing funding for this nonprofit. We're losing being in touch with being a dad. So I love that you said that.
Joe, if I could mention something, sorry, Jorge, you mentioned about funding. I totally agree. I used to work with a couple of elected officials. Definitely there needs to be more. I was going to mention, Joe could probably add to this, Fathering Together, I think received a federal grant recently or some funding. I think it's just important to promote that too. And Brian, but you're right. There needs to be more. Yes, and it starts with us, I think. Yeah, you're right.
I agree. And actually, yeah, it's a good plug. We're approaching our time. And so I do want to give a shout out to some upcoming Fathering Together sponsor programs, but totally want to shout out Brian Anderson and Chris Lewis, who are co-founders of this community. I mean, these are guys like you have full-time gigs and other responsibilities and raising, families. And so this project has garnered them funding from a national program. And I think it's on their socials. So I don't want to get anything wrong. But I do want to, thanks, Jess, for the plug to highlight and underscore the importance of their work in building community. I want to shout out all of you guys. Thank you so much for, I feel very inspired. I think anytime I'm surrounded by a lot of other fellow Latinos, I feel even more proud of my heritage. And just hearing you, that's no exception. I think I'm even more inspired hearing your individual stories. And there's I do work full-time with a nonprofit. Our goal is really working with Illinois colleges and universities to help them and guide them and really committing to closing graduation gaps for Black and Latino Latinx students, low-income students as well. And often we're saying, it's the proof is in the pudding in walking the walk versus just sort of espousing these values. And also, there's this notion for a lot of us in this work of social justice that there's power in the colectiva. And so I definitely feel that resonates tonight and having a chance to hear from all of you. I thank you all. I totally want to follow up with each and every one of you beyond tonight. I know many of us in a initial conversation, we talked about, hey, this could totally flow into a series, you know, that goes through a year or maybe longer. So I hope we can, you know, commit to that with Fathering Together or with your spaces and communities as well. So again, thank you for your time. And hang in there. I love a lot of what you all said in the importance of talking with one another and also seeking professional help. I think that's a topic that often gets overlooked. You know, certainly did in my upbringing of not bringing up, you know, professional therapists and all of that, but know that within this community of fathers too, there are, you know, folks, there are resources out there. And so with that, I do want to just highlight some upcoming programs sponsored by Fathering Together. This is the last of their July series of different panels. But Brian did want me to mention that there's more coming together for August. So in August, Fathering Together is going to be hosting a series of support groups, very timely, support groups that are focused on providing dads with strategies for how to handle the stresses of living in the time of COVID-19. There is going to be an opportunity to register for these groups. And so registration is going to go live very soon. Please check out the event section and please follow along on social media. Fathering Together is on Facebook, Twitter, as well as, I forget what other channels, LinkedIn. So, and appreciate Sergio, Marlon, Jorge, Jesse.
One more thing, if I may share.
Oh, please do. Yeah, please.
I really appreciate being on this space with you all. Because I think what we all agree on is we need to stop asking permission to have a seat on the table. That's what it is. I think as Latino, I self-identify myself as a Chicano, right? For different reasons. But I first, before that, I identify myself as a father. And I think what matters to me is making sure that we acknowledge everybody and each voice, and we deserve and have to have a seat on the table. You know what I mean? I mean, this is just like a conversation we're having on Zoom. Father, I mean, I think right now the crisis, there's like a weird, bizarre, I think it's a crisis in my opinion. It's a crisis of what the definition of a man means in the spectrum of identity, right? I would love to like talk about this later, and especially with you all, like what it means to be a hombre, with a palabra in this community, a father, and how that's connected to the gender identity in the diaspora. Because there's a lot of like deconstruction of what masculinity is and also toxic masculinity, and what's left, and what does that mean to be a man, to be a father, to be, what does that even mean now, right? Yeah. I would love to tackle that, because I feel like our Latino identity really goes in there and figures out what is it that's affecting us, making us feel so afraid of discussing about this, you know, and the fluidity of our gender identity. But for example, you know, I consider myself, like I said, a Chicano, Latino, you know, I guess, you know, I just happen to, you know, be married to my wife and I have 3 kids, but like, what does it mean now? You know what I mean? I just, we need to have a seat on the table and have these conversations.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And definitely, I know in catching the podcast, Soy Super Papa, you do tackle some of these issues, right? Sergio and
Yeah.
Marlon.
I invite you all. I would love to have each one of you to talk about this in my podcast. I think one of the things that goes with what Jorge is saying is having these conversations among ourselves, just because we belong to that community. We don't have to be invited into other communities to be able to speak for a community that's not ours. You know, if we have these conversations with our community, then the message spreads across. One of the things I wanted to, like, you know, invite all the audience to do, it's, so when you go to a dad convention, invite other dads that look like you and talk like you. So you'll see when you walk in how they are going to be like, wow, we didn't expect this many Latino dads. Like, we recently were at one in Washington, D.C., and there was a lot of African-American fathers. And somebody said to me, we didn't expect so many, like, you know, African-American fathers, Latino dads, but we took it upon ourselves to invite those dads that look different. So the content of the conferences, of the panels, change. So when you have a diverse audience, it's going to be a more realistic, more directed convention or summit or panel. So, you know, it's part of what we do. So I want to thank everyone. And thank you, Joe, for, being our moderator, and thank each of you guys for being here and voicing your opinions. And I invite you, let's get in touch and let's speak more. So
let's do it. I appreciate it. And are there any other closing thoughts folks would like to share? All right. Listen, be well and stay safe, each and every one of you, your families, your loved ones. Jesse will FaceTime later at some point. And thank you all. Yeah, this was a pleasure to be in company with all of you. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
It was
All right,
great.
Everybody
Thank you.
too. Yeah, stay safe.
Okay.
gracias.